She was just a waitress until one photo changed everything. Avery Morgan was mid-shift, tray in hand, weaving through crystal chandeliers and million-dollar gowns when she saw it. A photo hanging in a quiet hallway of the Ashcroft estate, black and white, framed in gold. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, smiling sweetly into the camera. Avery froze. Her breath hitched. Her hands trembled because the girl in the photo was her. Same soft curls, same scar above the brow. Same look she remembered from a childhood she barely understood. But how? She'd never been in this house, never met the Ashcrofts. So what was her childhood photo doing in on a billionaire's home? She didn't come here to find answers. But the moment she saw that picture, she knew someone had buried the truth, someone powerful. And if she wanted to uncover it, she'd have to risk everything. What Avery was about to discover would tear through a family legacy, expose a deadly secret, and lead to the most emotional reunion you'll ever witness. You won't believe where this story goes. Stay tuned to the end because the final twist will leave you speechless. Avery had worked dozens of events before, but none quite like this. The Ashcroft estate in Beaufort, South Carolina, didn't just look impressive, it looked unreal. Like it had been plucked from the frame of a classic film and dropped into reality. Towering white columns stretched skyward, standing proud against the sky bathed in the honeyed gold of late afternoon. Rows of manicured hedges bordered the property with military precision, each leaf in perfect alignment. A winding marble driveway curled toward the entrance like a silk ribbon, catching the sunlight and throwing it back in glints of ivory and gold. As the catering van rolled to a halt at the rear of the estate, Avery Morgan stared out the window for a second too long. Her breath caught in her throat, not from awe, but from the quiet pressure settling in her chest. She stepped out, tightening the straps of her apron as if they could hold her nerves together. "Just another shift," she whispered under her breath, trying to ignore the way her stomach fluttered. But it wasn't just nerves, it was something else, something she couldn't name yet. At 22, Avery was no stranger to hard work. Life hadn't given her many breaks. Raised by adoptive parents who worked multiple jobs just to put food on the table, she'd grown up learning that nothing came easy. Since she was 17, she'd been juggling gigs, barista by day, waitress by night, anything to stay afloat. Tonight was supposed to be more of the same. Serve drinks, smile, get paid, move on. The exclusive gala thrown by the Ashcroft family was just another line in her chaotic schedule. But the moment she stepped through the back entrance of the mansion, she felt it. That shift in the air. Something subtle but unmistakable. Like walking into a room moments after an argument. Like a storm was gathering, silent and invisible, behind the velvet curtains. Frederick, the head butler, was the first face she saw. He stood like a statue, stiff, upright, dressed in black. His voice was clipped, void of warmth. No talking to guests. Eyes down. Do your job and you'll be paid. Avery nodded quickly and gripped the silver tray tighter than she needed to. The atmosphere already felt too tight, too formal, like the walls themselves were watching. As the sun sank behind the trees, the estate came alive. Cars lined the driveway, polished to mirrors. Guests spilled into the grand foyer one after another. High-profile politicians, CEOs with the world in their pockets, and socialites shimmering in dresses that probably cost more than Avery made in 6 months. Their laughter sparkled like the crystal hanging above them. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glowed like frozen stars suspended in midair. A string quartet played a delicate tune in the corner, the kind that floated just under the noise of champagne flutes clinking in hushed conversations full of names Avery recognized from headlines. She weaved through the glittering sea of wealth, balancing champagne and hors d'oeuvres, her footsteps nearly silent on the polished floor. But something about the house gnawed at her. The elegance felt too perfect, too polished, like a beautiful mask hiding something cracked underneath. There was a tension in the air, not loud, but persistent, like a whisper just behind her shoulder that vanished every time she turned. Then she saw it, a narrow corridor, barely noticeable, branching off from the main hall. No velvet ropes, no signs, just a dimly lit passageway that seemed untouched, even by the extravagance surrounding it. Forgotten, almost hidden. Her pulse quickened. She shouldn't. She knew that. The staff were told to stay out of guest areas, much less wander into off-limits hallways. But logic had already lost the tug-of-war to instinct. Avery glanced over her shoulder. No one noticed her slip away. The hallway swallowed her in warm, antique light. The air was still, laced with the faint scent of aged wood and something older, dust maybe, or memory. The walls were lined with portraits, men with stern expressions, women dressed in lace and pearls, all staring out with the same distant pride. And then she stopped. There it was, hung alone on the wall, framed in thin black wood. A single photograph, a little girl, no older than 5, brown curls, big, expressive eyes, a small scar above her right eyebrow. She smiled at the camera, innocent, unaware. Avery's blood ran cold. It was her. Her body staggered back without permission, the tray slipping slightly in her hand. She knew that face, knew that dress, knew that scar. She'd had it since she was a toddler. The photo had been taken before she was adopted. Long before. So why? Was it here? Inside a billionaire's mansion she had never been to in her entire life? A sharp sound, footsteps behind her, snapped her back to reality. Panic surged. She spun around and hurried back toward the ballroom, forcing herself to breathe through the pounding in her chest. She resumed her role, serving drinks with a polite smile plastered on her face. But her hands shook with every flute she placed on a tray. Every face in the room became a blur. The music, the laughter, the opulence, all of it faded. Her mind kept going back to that photo, that little girl, that impossible truth. And the terrifying thought that someone somewhere in this house knew who had placed that photo there. And more importantly, why? Avery couldn't shake the image, even as the night wore on. During a brief break in the kitchen, she approached Martha, the estate's longtime cook. The older woman stood at the counter, her knife rhythmically dicing carrots with the ease of someone who'd done it for decades. "You've worked here a long time, right?" Avery asked, keeping her tone light, like casual conversation. Martha glanced at her with a smirk. "Long enough to have more secrets than recipes," she said with a wink. Avery smiled back, but her mind raced. "And the Ashcroft family? Have they always lived here?" "Oh, honey, Martha said, lowering her voice just a touch. "This estate's been in the family since before electricity. Charles Ashcroft only got the place after his brother Andrew and Andrew's wife died. Car accident. Real tragedy." Avery blinked. "His brother died in an accident?" she repeated, barely above a whisper. Martha nodded. "Years ago. Both of them gone in one night. People said it was bad luck. But around here," she paused, then shrugged. "Who really knows?" A cold knot twisted in Avery's stomach. That night, back in her cramped apartment in Edgewood, Avery lay stiff on her bed, eyes wide open in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, but her thoughts were louder. Her adoptive parents slept in the next room, blissfully unaware of the storm unraveling inside her. If the girl in the photo was really her, why was it hanging in that house? Why had no one ever told her about Andrew Ashcroft or the accident? And Charles, what did he know? Sleep never came. Just fragments, flickers. A face at the edge of memory she couldn't place. Whispers behind closed doors she didn't remember hearing. She lay awake in the dark, eyes wide open, drowning in questions no one had answered. The next evening, Avery returned to the estate. Same crisp uniform, same polished mask. But this time, she wasn't there to serve wine. She waited until the gala was in full swing, the guests lulled by champagne and string quartets. Then quietly she slipped away from the ballroom and into the hallway. Her heart thudded louder with every step. She didn't hesitate. She knew exactly where to go. But when she turned the corner, she stopped cold. The photograph was gone. The wall was bare. No frame, no nail, no faint outline on the wallpaper. Just smooth, empty space, like it had never been there at all. She stood there motionless, a slow dread blooming in her chest. Her breath caught, shallow and dry. Had she imagined it? No, she remembered it too clearly. The curls, the eyes, the scar above the brow, the smile, so small, so unaware. That was her. It had been there. So why remove it? Had someone seen her staring? Was someone Watching her now, a chill crept down her spine like ice running beneath the skin. The walls suddenly felt closer. The silence felt staged. This wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone knew, and they were already erasing the evidence. Avery swallowed hard and forced herself back to the kitchen, but everything had shifted. The air was different, tight, heavy. The clatter of cutlery sounded harsher than before, like knives against bone. Every sideways glance from the staff felt weighted, cautious. And the guests, their laughter rang hollow, too rehearsed, too clean. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. By the time her shift ended, Avery's nerves were shot through. Her skin felt too tight. Her thoughts moved too fast. She left the estate with more questions than she'd arrived with, and a sense of dread curling tight in her gut like a warning she couldn't unhear. The next morning, over breakfast, she sat across from her adoptive mother, Gloria. The kitchen should have felt safe. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching on the edge of the coffee pot, warming the tiled floor in golden streaks. But everything felt wrong, off-kilter, too normal. Gloria had just poured a fresh cup of coffee when Avery finally spoke. "Mom," she said, staring into the slow swirl of cream in her mug, "do you remember where I came from before the adoption?" Gloria paused mid-sip, caught off guard. "That's a strange question, honey. Why do you ask?" I just feel like something's missing," Avery said carefully. "Last night I saw a photo that looked exactly like me, as a child, in a house I've never been to before." The ceramic mug clinked softly against the table as Gloria set it down. Her hands trembled, just enough for Avery to notice. Avery thanked Marcus with a quiet nod, but her thoughts were spiraling. Too fast. Charles had taken over too fast. The timing matched. The story fit. Too perfectly. If what Martha and Marcus said was true, then she wasn't just a girl who'd been lost. She'd been hidden. That night, Avery sat at the bus stop outside the estate long after her shift ended. The air was cool, but she didn't feel it. Her fingers were clenched tightly around the edge of her coat, knuckles white. She watched the passing headlights, eyes blank, but her mind burned. Someone had erased her name, her parents, her life, but why? And what if it wasn't just about hiding the past? The next day, she did something she never thought she'd do. She called in a favor. Through a friend of a friend, she tracked down a name, someone who used to work at the Ashcroft estate years ago. Eleanor, a housekeeper, known for her loyalty to Andrew Ashcroft, especially in the years before the tragedy. Avery didn't know what she was hoping for. She just knew she had to go. The modest brick house sat quiet on the edge of Beaufort, nestled between wind-worn oaks and cracked sidewalks. She hesitated at the front step, then knocked. The door creaked open. The woman who answered was older now, silver streaking her dark hair, eyes ringed with quiet exhaustion. But there was a strength in her still, a straightness to her spine, the kind of woman who had once commanded rooms just by entering them. "Miss Eleanor?" Avery asked softly. The woman's gaze sharpened. "You're the one asking about the past." Avery nodded. There was a pause. Then the woman stepped aside, her voice low but firm. "Come in, child." Inside, the air smelled of lavender and old books. Faded sunlight slipped through gauzy curtains. The walls were lined with memories, sepia-toned photos, antique trinkets, porcelain roses. Avery sat stiffly on a threadbare couch as Eleanor moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. The clink of teacups, the gentle pour of water. She moved like someone who had done everything 1,000 times and who noticed everything even when she said nothing. But when she finally spoke, her words landed with weight. "I remember you," she said, setting the tea down with a soft clink. "You were 5, maybe younger. Your mother, Helena, she called you Rye. You'd run through the garden barefoot, always in that little yellow dress she loved. Andrew used to say your laughter could chase the ghosts out of that old house." Avery's throat tightened, her eyes stung. "So, what happened?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. Eleanor's eyes didn't leave hers. "Charles made sure you wouldn't remember." The words hit like a stone dropped in still water. She continued, slower now. "After the crash, they said the little girl died too, but your body was never found. Some of us, those who paid attention, knew it didn't add up. There were whispers, rumors that Charles had arranged something, that he didn't want any loose ends. Why? Avery breathed. Because with Andrew gone, Charles inherited everything. The estate, the business, the legacy. But if Andrew's daughter had survived, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Avery blinked hard. He buried me to take it all. Lelinar didn't nod. She just sat still, the silence louder than confirmation. I saw a photo, Avery said, voice shaking, of me in the hallway. But when I went back, it was gone. Lelinar's expression didn't change. Then he knows, and if Charles knows you're remembering, he won't stop. He never does. Avery stood slowly. Her hands were cold. Her thoughts louder than the room around her. She wasn't just a forgotten child. She wasn't nobody. She was Ray Evelyn Ashcroft, and someone had stolen her life, her name, her family, and they were still trying to keep it buried. She stepped out of Eleanor's house with her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Every word the woman had said echoed with sharp clarity. Charles made sure you wouldn't remember. Your body was never found. He took everything. The image of that photo, the curls, the scar, the soft, unknowing smile burned behind her eyes like fire. She hadn't imagined M.I.M. She hadn't been wrong. She wasn't crazy. She'd been erased, but not anymore. 2 days later, the perfect opportunity came. Charles left the estate on a business trip. According to whispers in the kitchen, he'd be gone all evening. No one said where, no one dared ask. That was just how things worked in this house. Avery didn't waste time. She showed up to her catering shift early, dressed as usual, tray in hand. But her eyes weren't on the guests tonight. They were on the stairs, the third floor, the forbidden wing. She waited for the ballroom to fill. Waited until the noise was thick and the staff too distracted to notice one server quietly slipping away. She moved like smoke. Quiet, focused. Every hallway felt heavier. Every chandelier above seemed to hum with warning. But she kept going, past the guest rooms, past the locked door to Charles's office, until she reached it. A large oil painting hung crooked on the wall. She knew from Eleanor's tip the safe was behind it. Her hands trembled as she pushed the frame aside, revealing a digital keypad embedded in the wall. She took a breath, entered the date, 04/09/2005, the day her world had ended. Click. The lock disengaged. She opened the door slowly, her breath catching in her throat as the heavy panel creaked open. Inside, stacks of documents, USB drives, old ledgers, and then an envelope, cream-colored, handwritten, to my daughter, Ray. Her knees nearly gave out. With shaking fingers, she opened it. My sweet Ray, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. Your father and I knew we were in danger. Charles is not who he pretends to be. He wants the inheritance, the name. Don't trust him. But never forget who you are. Ray Evelyn Ashcroft. You are our daughter, our everything. Love, Mom. Avery gasped. A sob caught in her throat. It was real. All of it. The erasure, the lie, the theft of an entire life. And then, footsteps. Her body froze. A voice, cold and sharp. Well, she turned. Charles stood in the doorway, his shadow long against the floor. I was wondering when you'd come looking for answers, he said, stepping inside, shutting the door behind him with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. Avery stood tall, even as her hands trembled around the letter. I know what you did, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I know who I am. He laughed, low, bitter. You think anyone's going to believe a girl from a shelter over me? You were a mistake, Ray, just like your father. Too soft to lead this family. I had proof, she snapped. Letters, documents, the truth. His expression darkened. The mask of wealth and charm fell away, revealing something colder. Then you're not walking out of here. She ran, adrenaline surged through her veins like fire. She bolted past him before he could grab her, tearing down the hall, heart hammering, lungs burning. Security shouted behind her. She didn't stop. She hit the service stairs, slammed through the back door, and dove into her car. Tires screamed as she sped out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, Charles stood at the top of the stairs, watching her vanish, but this time she wasn't the scared little girl who had disappeared. She was coming back with the truth. The next day, Avery met with an investigative journalist, someone who'd spent years chasing stories no one else dared touch. She handed over the documents, the letter, the flash drives. Within 48 hours, headlines exploded. Scandal at the Ashcroft estate. CEO under investigation for inheritance fraud and cover-up. The house of cards Charles had built began to collapse, publicly. A week later, breaking news hit every major outlet. Footage showed a woman, frail, gray-haired, eyes distant, being escorted from a private psychiatric clinic near Nashville. Avery dropped everything and drove all night. She didn't stop until she reached the clinic, didn't breathe until she opened the door. The woman was seated by the window staring at the trees beyond the glass. "Mom," Avery whispered. The woman turned. Her eyes widened. "Ray?" Their voices broke in the same breath. Tears, or just 1,000 missing years, vanished in a single embrace. Two souls, ripped apart by greed, finally reunited. Doctors said her mother had suffered trauma-induced amnesia. Charles had hidden her away, declared her dead, and locked her in silence. But Avery's courage had dragged the truth into the light. Weeks later, Avery took the stand in court. Calm, unflinching. She told her story, showed the letters, the photos, the safe. Charles Ashcroft was arrested, convicted. The Ashcroft name, once a symbol of prestige, was now synonymous with betrayal. But Avery didn't reclaim the estate. She didn't care about power or money. She wanted peace. She and her mother moved to a quiet town in Vermont. Together, they opened a small community center for orphans, displaced kids, the forgotten and unseen. For children like Avery had once been. And every morning as light broke through the trees and warmth filled their quiet home, Avery sat beside her mother and whispered the words she'd waited a lifetime to say. "I'm finally free." But what if it had been you? What if one day a single photograph shattered everything you thought you knew about your past? Would you have walked away? Or would you have chased the truth, no matter how painful, no matter who tried to stop you? Avery didn't choose this story, it chose her. And in facing it, she uncovered more than a hidden past. She reclaimed her voice. Now I want to ask you, did you feel something? Did Avery's journey stay with you, even for a moment? Because stories like these aren't just fiction. They're reflections. Echoes of real fear, real hope, real resilience. If you've ever felt forgotten, lost, or silenced, let this be a reminder. You are not alone, and your story matters. So, what would you do if the truth came knocking? Would you open the door? Did our story leave you with a sense of closure? If it touched you even just a little, stay with us a while longer. Because this isn't just fiction. We've listened to countless real stories, true voices from people who were left behind, silenced, forgotten. People whose truths were buried beneath years of fear, grief, or indifference. Stories that sound like they came from a movie, but they didn't. They came from real life. And now we're ready to share them. One by one, each voice, each truth. Listen, because sometimes all it takes is one person listening to change someone's life.